Hello everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Living with me, your host, Jared Warne. So I have a really cool episode for you today. I'm going to be talking about two recent investigations we did over the past week, which was St Mary's Church in Church in Pendle, where it is said that Alice Nutter is buried, who was one of the ladies who was hung for being a Pendle Witch. And also we went to Lea Asylum in Lancaster in the UK yesterday, Wednesday the 9th, for an investigation which turned out to be very interesting, from thinking nothing's going to happen to being physically touched. And I will get into that and tell you all about that in the episode. So I really do hope you enjoy these experiences we've just gone through over the past week. But before we do go into that, I just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for all your listens, all your likes and comments, and the subscribers on YouTube, of course. And the show is going from strength to strength, so I really, really do appreciate it. Also, don't forget we are sponsored by Paranormal Technology, Paratech, who are based in Northern Ireland. Make sure you check them out on Facebook to get all your paranormal equipment from there. As many of you have seen on the live vigils we do and other bits and bobs, all our equipment is from Mark, and he will look after you. So make sure you go check him out on Facebook. Also, he is doing a deal. If you send him a screenshot that you've liked the Paranormal Living page, he will give you 10% off your first order. And he has some amazing equipment, from music boxes. He's now just released a spirit box this past 2 weeks, which is absolutely amazing. We used that at both of the investigations over this past week and got some amazing things come through that. So, like I say, guys, Paranormal Technology, Paratech. So this is now time for the exciting thing. So going back to last Friday, we went to St Mary's Church, which is a church in Pendle. As I mentioned, Alice Nutter, who was one of the ladies who was tried for witchcraft and then later hung at Lancaster Castle, she's reportedly buried there in an unmarked grave with the Nutter family, which is the main grave what everyone goes to see when they're in that area. Because if you look at the gravestone, some of the Nutter family passed away around the time she was obviously hung for witchcraft. And I'll tell you one thing what is crazy about this church and obviously the cemetery. As you walk down there, you look at the church, there is an eye on the church, and they say this is the eye of God. And this is to warn away evil spirits and the witches and, things like that in folklore. And, this church was built in the 1600s at some point. So an amazing history about this place. As we arrived, Denise and Susan were already there. And then, of course, we had Carl and Bob with us. So we went for a bit of a wander around the graveyard and around the sort of surrounding areas, because the plan was to originally go to another location, which is where there is a face in the stone, which is very bizarre. And sort of if you go on our Facebook page, you'll see it on there. But it reminds you of old father time. It's very, very cool. So we was looking for that. Unfortunately, couldn't find it. But as we're walking, Bob was obviously taking pictures, and as he looked in the sky, it did look like there was a skull in the shape of this cloud. I don't really do cloud watching personally, but Bob noticed it straight away, took the picture, and everyone saw it, and there was a skull. It was very, very bizarre. So as we then proceeded back down to the cemetery, as I mentioned, as soon as you sort of walk in, there's a weird vibe about this place. Sometimes it's not the nicest either. You always just feel like you're being watched all the time. It's very, very, very weird. And then obviously we started our investigation, so we're walking around the graveyard, and the weird thing was there's so many hidden graves. So as we're walking through the front of the church, I'm speaking to Denise, sort of feel where she might feel drawn to. So she was walking, so we followed her, and then we ended up at this grave under this tree, which is sort of hidden, as I mentioned about the hidden graves. And then she put a hand on the grave just to see what she could sense and what she could feel. And then she started getting quite emotional. And then she was telling us about this dream she had, where she saw this grave, and it was either black or it was if they had the railings around the grave. So we obviously carried on walking around the graveyard and couldn't find this grave anywhere. And so she said it must have just been the dream. Must have been something, nothing. And then we just saw this big shrub. Like I said, this graveyard's not very big, but there's just this tree sort of next to one of the pathways. So we decided to just take a look by chance, moved the sort of bit of the shrub out of the way, and there is this grave, what she picked up on. So the railings had gone, and this grave's back from, I think it was like the 1820s, and it was just hidden away under the shrubs. People have probably not seen this for years and years, and it's just left. We sort of all realised how sometimes things are left, unfortunately. Like certain gravestones and certain graves are just left derelict. And again, just this big shrub, which you never would have seen this grave under there. I just thought it was a tree. Absolutely amazing. And again, through certain parts of the cemetery, you just walk into a tree, and then all of a sudden there's just graves there, and the slabs, of course, are on the floor. Absolutely crazy. It's just a shame, really, that they sort of left derelict. So then we decided to start the investigation, and we split up. So Denise and Susan went to one end of the cemetery, and me, Carl, and Bob went to the bottom, because when we've been there in the past, we felt drawn to that specific area. So we started down there, so we pulled the spirit box out and started calling out. So we got some murmurs and some weird stuff come through, but nothing physically voice-wise, but, just certain things what were a bit shouldn't come through, really, of course, through the spirit box. And then, as we're calling out, and then something come through, and it was like a lady's voice, but it come through that quick, and that creepy. It literally didn't register straight away. Like I say, if you go back to the footage on Facebook for the investigation, you can see it all on there. But it's very weird, and that sort of startled me a bit. And then as we looked over where Denise was, she had the cat balls going off. So then we stopped our investigation with the spirit box and walked over to Denise. And that's when she was saying about, you sort of feel like you're on a ship through parts of this cemetery. And we said, the same thing, because if you go on another part of the cemetery, I think it's on the left-hand side, you just feel like you're walking on a wave. It's very odd. And then, obviously, we're all asking questions then. The cat balls are going off. But you get a weird vibe from this part of the graveyard. It's very weird. And it's like you're in two different places. So as soon as you walk down the pathway and you get to this part to where we are now, the energy completely changes. I can't explain it. It's just bizarre. And we all felt the exact same thing. And then as we carry on moving, after we'd finished our investigation there with the cat balls, you get random noises. And it's like, I always said, it's like you're being taken on a goose chase. It's someone gives you a sign over there, so you're like, right, we'll go over there and move to that part. Then you get a noise over somewhere else, a noise over somewhere else. And obviously there's no one else in the cemetery apart from us. So it's really disorientating, and it's quite uncomfortable at times. So as we moved to the left-hand side, again, felt like you're walking on a ship. The energy is just really, really weird. And we set up the music box and the cat balls. So the music box ended up going off, which it shouldn't have done, because Denise put it upside down. And obviously, if anything walks past it, that's when it goes off. So Mark was watching, of course, from Paranormal Technology, and he said it shouldn't go off, but it's going off. Really unexplainable. And then all of a sudden, we heard someone go, "Ugh," exactly like that. I think I might have swore. And I turned then to who was next to me, which was Carl, and said, "Did you hear that?" It's like, "Yeah." Was that you? It's like, "No." So we're all talking about it, because we're like, right, that's not normal, and that was clear as anything, but nobody did it. So me and Carl then took it upon ourselves to go for a walk. So obviously got the torches. We left Denise, Susan, and Bob with the equipment to carry on filming, as we then went for a walk just to see, I don't know, what maybe it was. So then we left the graveyard at the side entrance just to see if there was someone, maybe walking around the grounds at the back and just being silly. But nothing there. There's no one around. So we're like, right, that is really bizarre. I can't explain that. It is unexplainable. So then we come back into the graveyard, and then as we got to the gates to get back in, we could hear someone walking, and these noises coming from sort of the top end of where the church is. So obviously we walked up there with the torches, and again, there's no one around. So this is what I mean about, you feel like you're disorientated, and it's sort of mind-boggling at parts. Then, as we come back to Denise, Bob and Susan, we mentioned that this noise was coming from the top, so maybe we should move to the top. And then it sounded like there was someone stood behind us or walking towards us. Again, nobody there. Because part of me at first thought, I wonder if someone's coming to the ground to see what we're up to. We're going to get told off by maybe a groundskeeper or something like that. But nobody there. Unexplainable again. So then we decided to move to the top of the church. So we put a piece of equipment out which is called a radar pod, which sort of picks up stuff what could possibly be behind the door. If anyone walks behind the door or, so far, it gives you quite a wide spectrum of the place. So we set that up and it went off. And then the music box goes off. So I'm like, right, okay. And obviously we stood nowhere near this, so we don't make any of this go off. And then we tried to debunk it, couldn't debunk it. And then it was that point Denise said we'd go to the grave. So we went to the grave where, as I mentioned, Alice Nutter is reportedly buried. And then we put the cat balls on the grave, because it's like a stone slab above the grave. And it was a music box as well. And that's when things went south, I could say. So as Denise is communicating, we did distinguish that it wasn't Alice Nutter coming through. Cat balls were flashing, having these experiences. Then, as we stood there, Denise mentioned about someone walking past her. So, which was weird because no one's moved. There's no breeze or anything. And the cat balls are going again. So then, obviously, we had this conversation about her, and I think she respected the fact that we were quite sympathetic, especially to Alice Nutter, because, as I mentioned, her story is, she had land. She was quite a wealthy woman at the time, and she'd gone to Lancaster Castle, to the court, to sort of argue over land because they wanted the land because her husband had passed away. And then because she stood up to him, they didn't like that. And back then, women never sort of spoke out of term or obviously stood up for themselves. And then it was then accused of witchcraft and being a part of the Good Friday meeting at Malkin Tower. And then she was unfortunately hung. And we started asking these questions, and then the balls were flashing. Or if we ask a question and obviously it's not right, the balls don't flash. It was crazy. Unbelievable. And then it got to the point where Carl started feeling sick and giddy, and all these weird energy he was feeling. So he sort of drinking a bottle of water. We sort of took him away a bit. And then I just felt really odd, and I was just staring into space, and as if, you might be in a different place. Again, disorientating, feeling out of place. And then it wasn't until we asked a question and mentioned about the person who was the witch hunter, we'll call him, who was obviously arrested, the Pendle Witches, and brought him to trial. And that's when the balls were going off, and about him being here. And the balls were going off again. And Denise was saying she just, as we're all feeling this, she was saying she physically just feels like there's someone making the way up. They're making their way up the graveyard towards us, and they're getting closer and closer and closer. But it's something negative about this gentleman who is here, and the fact that we're obviously talking to Alice Nutter. And she said it just reminded her like spiders coming up, like, that kind of thing. And I've never seen Denise want to leave somewhere so fast. And it got to the point where we said thank you. The cat balls stopped flashing at this point. It was like the energy had changed. She'd left. So we started packing. Denise like, we need to leave. I'm like, what, is it really that bad? She's like, yeah, there's something not nice coming. And it's just getting closer and closer and closer. And I think at this point it's about 10 to midnight. So then we end up leaving the graveyard, and the difference from just leaving that gate and shutting the gate behind you onto the main street was crazy. It was like you had a full weight just lifted off your shoulders. Can't explain it. And, she rang me the day after, and she'd woke up in the middle of the night and saw this lady sat on a bed who said her name was Alice. And she was confirming that whatever was coming up the graveyard, the gentleman, obviously, who they called the witch hunter, it was him. and the fact that what we were doing he didn't like, because obviously back then he would have seen it as witchcraft, like the mediumship and things. And she said, obviously, if he would have got to where we were, it wouldn't have been great. And obviously, I think we probably would have been affected in a negative way. What we probably may have sort of out of our hands, and we didn't know how to deal with that. I think it could have been quite disastrous at that point, which is, of course, why we left so fast. Now it's been just short of a week, and looking back and just obviously telling you all about our experience there, it's definitely a place I would go back to. Not in the near future, maybe, later on in the year, but whatever is in there negative wise it's not very nice, and I didn't enjoy that bit. So moving forward now to Wednesday the 9th, we went to Lea Asylum, which is an abandoned derelict asylum in Lancaster. And what an amazing place this was. Very eerie. It had everything for a horror film, I guess you could say. So as we got there and walking down the driveway up to the building, it just stands there on its own. There's nothing around there, and it's just majestic. It has this aura about it. And then as we're walking round, we feel quite calm at this point. And then Bob tells us obviously a bit about the history of the place, because I didn't know much. I just know it was opened back in 1816 as what they called it, as a lunatic asylum, and then closed back in 2013. So obviously like 200 years of that place being open, and quite a lot of the brickwork is the original brickwork from when it first opened. And as he was telling us, that there is a lot of unmarked graves around the ground because they didn't have a cemetery. They just used to bury people on the grounds of the asylum, which probably made us a bit more nervous then, because you didn't know where you was walking. So as we got in there, straight away there's an eerie feel, but I understand that because obviously it is an abandoned hospital. It's just huge as well. I knew this place was big, but until we got in there, I can't express how big it actually was. And then as we got there, and the entrance we went in from, you're sort of in the middle of the main corridor on the ground floor, and this place, you can see both ends of the corridor, and it's unbelievable. It was like, wow. So as me, Bob and Carl are walking round, we started calling out just as we're walking round. We had a few sort of knocks and sounds and things, but nothing too much. And then obviously we're trying to debunk it, thinking, could it be a bird, or could it be something, which we later couldn't debunk, wasn't sure. So it is open, obviously, to interpretation. And then the one thing I found weird, though, as we're walking through the corridor, you could be in a certain part of the corridor, so in the darkest bit, for example, and feel absolutely fine, just a bit eerie. But then you could walk to the other end of the corridor, where obviously the sunlight's beaming through, and there's just something not nice, or this weird feeling which you can't explain, what you're sensing, picking up on. Wasn't great, that wasn't nice. It was weird, but then again, you could walk 3 feet up the corridor and be absolutely fine. It's a very weird place, a lot of weird energy going on, but obviously it is that old. There's been a lot of history there, a lot of people have worked there, a lot of patients have been there. So obviously you probably are picking up on a mismatch of energy. So as we're walking round and looking through the place, we ended up walking through this corridor, and there was a room right in front of us, and it was like a psychiatric room. So there was like a plastic bed there, still there. There was no hooks on the wall, so obviously it was used for people with mental health issues. And there was straight away, you got that vibe in that room. It's quite emotional. There was something very overwhelming about that room. Obviously, at that point, we didn't really know what it was used for as such. Yeah, it was just not nice. That's all I'll say. So we decided to start the investigation in that room, just because we felt sort of drawn to stay in there. So we put, obviously had the equipment with us. We just put the cat balls out to start. So we put 2 on the bed and in the doorway. So as we're calling out, there's bits of noises again, but nothing too much where you think it could be spirit, or is it a rational explanation. And then it got to the point Carl was calling out, and then there was some knocks from the window, there is an office next to this bedroom to this room. And there was knocks coming on the wall from there, but there was obviously no one in there. It's an empty room. And then further down the corridor, some noises again. So Bob stayed in the room and carried on calling out as we moved just down the corridor just to have a look around the place. And again, can't explain these noises. So then we thought, we'll move because there's nothing sort of happening in the room we was in. So I thought, we'll carry on walking through the place. And then we come to a staircase. So I said, we'll go on to the second floor, we'll have a look round. And then as I'm walking up this staircase, there was just a really uncomfortable, eerie feeling. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't nice. It didn't feel great, to be honest. So then as we're on the second floor, we're just walking round, and there was a completely different feel to this floor, nothing out of the ordinary. There was no noises, to be honest. And I just remember thinking that, is this place haunted? Because from a lot of the things we've seen about this place, there's never actually been a paranormal investigation there. It's normally people just going to have a look round and obviously sort of look at the place. As we obviously decided to do a paranormal investigation. So walking around, calling out, nothing's really happening. And like I say, I thought to myself, is it haunted, or, maybe it's not. Maybe there is no spirits around us here. So then we carried on walking. So I just carried on filming, just impressed at the place because it was awesome. So after the walk round and calling out, not really getting much, we decided to go back down to the bottom floor. And we'd walk past what was the canteen, the kitchen area. And I saw the sign saying welcome. So I thought, we'll go in here because we haven't been in this room at this point. Because I thought, I wonder if this is what would have been the main entrance. And as we got there was a kitchen there. So I said, I'm just feeling the place. And I'm like, I think we should stay in here and do something. So then we set up the music box. And a few other bits, got the spirit box out as well. And as we sort of calling out, there was some knocks from sort of the back of the kitchen area. And then all of a sudden, this music box goes off. And we're stood far away from this. So as we do try and debunk it, we walk forward, we wave our arms around just to make sure it definitely didn't pick us up, which it didn't. So then we're calling out again, asking questions, of course, like, did you work here, or was you a patient here? And again, I think it was the question would say, was you a patient here? The music box goes off again. So then I decided to turn the spirit box on. And I will say we got some weird things coming through there. So as it's going through, these like murmurs, is like grunting sounds and stuff, which obviously it shouldn't pick up. If it was picking up any radio, like you wouldn't have anything like that on there. So the activity is starting to build up more. And we're getting knocks, and Carl had heard a woman's voice next to him. So it was weird because, like I said, when we were on that second floor, I thought maybe there isn't anything sort of happening. And then all of a sudden we get back into that sort of where I felt drawn to, and that's where the activity started. So the music box went off, I think, 2 more times, I think it was. And then we proceeded to move from the kitchen back down to the bottom of the corridor because there was a bit of the building we hadn't been in. So as we're walking down the corridor, I just got to the bottom to where this door was on my right, and I said, I don't like it here. I walked back to Carl and said, there's just something here, and I don't like it. It's really freaked me out. I said, there's just a weird feeling. I said, I can't explain it. So then Bob decided to put the cat balls out on the floor and the music box towards the right-hand side where I could sort of feeling something not that nice. So as I'm about to go through this door, the cat ball starts flashing. So we're like, okay. So obviously we give it a minute, the cat ball goes off, and then it stops. And then Bob's like, is there anything can make that go off? I said, no. I said, there's literally nothing there. So I walked up, debunk it, make sure there's no draft or just anything what could physically make it go off. Because obviously with the cat balls, you have to physically touch them to make them go off. And then it got freaky because the side where I said I felt uncomfortable, we heard someone go, woo. And we all looked at each other like, what the hell was that? Couldn't explain it, obviously. And I said, there's someone here. So then we started calling out then because the cat ball started flashing again. So we asked, obviously, questions. And the first one we did come to was, were you the matron of the hospital? or the asylum. And the cat ball proceeded to flash. Then there was a whistle to the side of us again. So we were like, right, okay. But the music box wasn't going off. So I was asking, is it possible for you to make the music box go off? And then, as we carried on asking these questions from, are you walking around us? Do you look after the place as you do? Going, sort of getting a note of things or trying to build a story as such. We then found out that there is something negative in this place because upstairs on the second floor, Carl had been in one of the rooms and there were some negative signs on the walls, which weren't very good, as if someone had been doing something they shouldn't have been doing. And then naturally, just remembering, in one of the rooms me and Bob was in, it said, "He is coming, you need to run." But I didn't think anything of that because is it graffiti or, whatever. But then it all started to make sense as we then proceeded to ask about this negative energy and the cat balls again are flashing. So we then moved the music box up to where the cat ball was. So the cat ball would go off, but no music box. So obviously if there was a draft or anything, you'd think they'd go off together, and they weren't. And then what was weird about this bit, as we're looking down the corridor, it just seemed to get darker and darker and darker and darker, which, well, I can't explain that. But I just got that feeling, I think we should go. Just got a negative, horrible feeling. But we stayed, and then all of a sudden we'd asked this question, the balls weren't flashing. And then all of a sudden something physically touched me in my chest, as if someone had poked me or prodded me in the chest. And I looked at Carl and went, something's just touched me. And that is the first time I've been physically touched like that by a spirit. Sometimes you can sense them around you. You might feel something past your hand or, maybe a sensation. But to be physically prodded in my chest by something, what I can't explain, which really did freak me out. I said, I've had enough now. I said, it's time to go. I don't want to stay any longer to find out if this is something negative and something what, has been conjured up. Don't want to find that out. So we then decided to pack everything up because we all got quite spooked at that point, and we thought it's probably now best time to leave. Probably should have left when I said about the corridor seemed to be getting darker, and I just had that feeling we probably should have left at that point. So guys, I do hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Paranormal Living and obviously the experiences we did have at our recent investigations. Don't forget, we will be live Friday night at 9 p.m. GMT time for our preview show, where we show you around where we are and give you a bit of a history about the place. And then we are normally back live for 10 p.m. GMT time on our Facebook page, of course, for both lives, where we start with the live vigil. So I do hope you can join us on the lives. And of course, every Tuesday we are live from 7:30 p.m. GMT time on Facebook and YouTube, Paranormal Living and Paranormal Living TV, where it is Paranormal Tuesdays, which is our weekly episodic program, where, of course, me, Carl and Bob talk all things paranormal, get your views on the latest paranormal news, and, of course, your comments on, like, things, is it real, fake, or rational explanation. I love the community we are building on the Facebook and YouTube, and, everyone's different opinions on things. It's absolutely brilliant. So make sure you tune in 7:30 p.m. every Tuesday. We are live, of course, on Facebook and YouTube. Finally, from me, enjoy the rest of your weekend, everybody. Stay safe, love and light. Adios.